Hello, my friends. Jim Messina here from Vintage Drums Talk. It's time for another studio segment for you. I'll tell you, I've got a very fascinating guest tonight. He's an old-timer in the vintage drum community. He's been around a long time, and he's none other than my good friend, Joe Luoma from Minnesota. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, Jim, I'm doing good. How about you?
I am doing fine down here in Florida. A little muggy, but we'll put up with it.
Well, summertime has hit up here, too, so, yeah.
Say,
which is good.
Joe and I just
winter, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we just came off the Chicago show. I got to let you folks know that Joe and I just were up at the recent 2014 Chicago Drum Show up there in
Great show. Rob Cook and the crew put on just a great show.
Yep, 25 years coming up next year.
Mm-hmm,
but we did.
Yeah.
Those of you that saw Joe's interview, you'll be very impressed. You know who I'm talking about. But we wanted to continue on with some more from Joe Luoma. We've just decided to talk about a three-way tuning concept, okay? Now, here's the deal. With three-way tuning, most people associate that with Billy Gladstone drums. At least I do. And, Joe, I know you own a couple of those. We did a segment a while back at the 2010 show, and you had some very interesting drums that can illustrate the idea, the concept of three-way tuning. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, Jim, that 2010 video, I believe that's on your site, right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that one we used, I called it three ways. Uh-huh. And, of course, there was the final one was the Billy Gladstone three-way drum. And the middle one was the Gretsch Gladstone three-way tuning drum. Uh-huh. And the first one was the one that almost nobody knows about, and that is the A.M. Hoskins three-way tuning drum.
I had never heard of the Hoskins drum, but I think what we should do, for those of you who don't know about the Gladstone tuning system or three-way tuning, Joe's going to tell us just how that exactly works. What is the benefit, and how does that actually work with the Gladstone drums as far as three-way tuning?
Yeah, well, the three-way tuning on the Billy Gladstone and the Gretsch Gladstone drum used a three-way drum key, and on that, and back in the day, they had calfskin heads, and if it was humid, the heads would get soggy. So this allowed you to tune the drum. One side of the key would tune just the top head, another side of the key would tune just the bottom head, and the third side of the key would tune both at the same time. And so Billy came up with a key system. He was, he played at Radio City Music Hall as he was coming out of the orchestra pit. In the spotlight, he didn't want to be goofing around with going underneath the drum to tune the bottom head up. And so this way he could just casually, from the top, tune the drum just how he wanted it. Nowadays, with the modern heads, it's not necessary anymore.
Not a problem.
But
that must have been a nightmare.
It was a good idea, a great idea at the time, and Billy was full of great ideas. Yeah.
He was an inventor, wasn't he?
Oh, he was an inventor and a master drummer. Yeah, he was. Yeah. So he was quite the guy. Had quite a few patents, and
So his tuning system was, you say, basically came about because of the inconsistencies with calfskin heads.
Right. The humidity would.
So this drum key, we just showed what that key looks like. It's really weird, but and I believe in our 2010 video you kind of showed how that worked a little bit. We'll put that up again.
That's
too.
a great video to go through to see the insides of the drums and everything too. Yeah. That shows a lot on the different drums. Now the one we're talking about that most people don't know of is the A.M. Hoskins.
A.M. Hoskins.
I'm from Minnesota, and there's quite a few drums have come out of this state, very unusual ones, and this is one of them. Sometime we'll do a segment on unusual Minnesota drums, but the A.M. Hoskins, or his name was Eldemore M. Hoskins, and he patented a system. It was a three-way tuning system. He called it differential tension rods, and it uses thumb screws, which was during this era. It was patented in 1913, and during the era, thumb screws were common. So, and it uses thumb screws, and the thumb screws are at the bottom of the drum. So again, one double thumb screws. One would tune the top, one would tune the bottom, or both together would tune them both at the same time. So thus three-way tuning.
Just like
the patent. He received the patent in November 4th of 1913, although he listed as November 6th on the drum. And also I found out that the 1940 U.S. Census listed Adelmore as born in 1868, and he was 72 in 1940. And he was a resident of Ward 5 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So here's a three-way tuning system, 1913, way before the Gretsch. Billy Gladstone patented his it was September of 1939. So
wow.
1913 to 1939, quite a few years before. Yeah.
So we're talking the concept was born much earlier, but the method is little different. But the concept.
Thumb screw method versus a key method.
Yeah.
But it's the same differential tuning.
So Billy Gladstone invented that version of it, and he really kind of took the credit for it. I mean, most people accredited Billy Gladstone with the three-way tuning system.
His was different. He did use a key. He used a three-way key, and he tuned it from the top. So, but the actual three-way part, the three-way tuning part, was quite a few years earlier. So, but the key, and of course, it had to be patentable. I mean, I'm sure they cited this Hoskins drum when he was going for his patent. I mean, if it wasn't patentable, they would have said, no, it's already been done. But his version, he patented that version on it. So it's you could say it's an improvement on it.
And that happens all the time. With patents, you go in and you find something, you change, you make a minute change to it, and you're allowed to use it because it's not the exact same copy.
You can improve upon somebody's patent, and and you can get your own patent. Yeah. So there you have it.
So now with the Billy Gladstone, there are some other differences other than just the three-way tuning. Now that we're talking about Gladstones,
right?
It's very interesting about the Hoskins concept and the versus Billy Gladstone. But from what I remember, you were showing me at the show when we had those two drums in front of us, the difference between a Billy Gladstone version and a Gretsch Gladstone, as far as I think the muffling system wasn't there a cable involved with one of those?
Yes. In fact, the drum I had at the show with the white marine pearl Gretsch Gladstone. I think they first appeared in the 1939 Gretsch catalog. I hope I got that. I believe that's right.
Where's Chet Falzerano when we need him?
Yeah, I think that's right. The 30. I know it's in the 39 and the 41, whatever. And I think that was the first one it appeared in. And that being patented in 39, I would guess that's a good guess. But that one is in Rob Cook's new Gretsch book, which is an incredible book, by the way.
I just picked that up at the show.
And there's a lot of close-ups of that drum in that book. The cable, it's got a real wild cable muffling system, and it's just a very ornate drum, very Art Deco. A lot of they put a lot of work into the drum. They machine the lugs, and they put nice little grooves in them, and like a very Art Deco lugs on them, which Gretsch is doing a version of right now on their drums. They came out with that old Gladstone-style lug. And when Billy started making his own, I would imagine that was pretty expensive to start doing all the fancy, all the fancy work on the lugs and stuff. So his was a little more basic. But he also went to two posts to hold the lug instead of one, which was probably a good idea.
So you got no
and
twisting.
Also he went to a hex pin system that goes down and to turn the bottom key instead of a tongue and groove system, which was also an improvement, better idea. So
now when did you get the Hoskins drum? How long have you had that drum?
Oh, I've had that over 10 years, maybe 10, 12 years, something like that. Oh, more. It might be longer than that even. You know how time flies. Could be 15.
And
And it's when I got it, didn't hit me as, I just thought, wow, this is really interesting. But, to me, I love having stuff like that because it's stuff that nobody really knows about. It's just unique.
Well, that's why I'm so fascinated because, again, the whole concept of three-way tuning is always, in most of our minds, has been attributed to Billy Gladstone, which is true, his version of the three-way tuning.
Yeah,
but the whole general
drum key, right?
Yeah, the whole general concept now, I'm finding out, was done by Hoskins. And I think that's fascinating, and that you happened to pick that up years ago. Otherwise, when I see the drum, nice-looking drum, but there are others, from that era. Wood shell, wood hoops, big deal.
Right.
But it's that system that he did with those thumb screws.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the Gladstones, what did you have first, the Billy or the Gretsch Gladstone?
Ooh, let's see. I think that I had that Gretsch Gladstone before the Billy. I've had a few Gretsch Gladstones and a few Billies, but that was. In fact, I found it's a lot harder for me to find a Gretsch three-way Gladstone than a Billy.
Isn't that something? I was just going to say to our guys out there, some of you new collectors, we're talking about Billy Gladstone drums. They're extremely rare, the snare drums. How many snares did he make, Joe?
Well, there's 50. I guess there's 50-some snares.
Yeah, and how many sets?
Well, as far as Gretsch three-way Gladstones, I only know of I can count them on one hand that I know of, the three-ways, not the two-way. They made a two-way also.
Oh, okay.
But the three-ways. So, I'm talking about in complete condition, and maybe, so I know very few of those.
Yeah, so you guys, we're talking about some real rare drums that Joe's got here. When Billy was making these snares, from what I understand, he wanted to get them in all the major symphonies. That was his original intention, right? So he would kind of, he would kind of make a nameplate for that particular symphonic percussionist. And other drummers of note, Louis Bellson, people like that. But again, I'm trying to think exactly how many snares are out there that we know of. They're all pretty much accounted for, aren't they?
Well, I don't know if they're all accounted for, but the Billies, they're well documented. Where the Gretsch three-way Gladstone, well, keep in mind the Gretsch three-way was made in 1939. I mean, the country wasn't, we're coming off the Great Depression. And I don't think people were really, putting a lot of money into fancy drums then.
Yeah, so this would have been a particularly high-end drum in those years?
Right, very high-end drum.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. That was that was the big splash in the 1939 catalog. And especially, so, it was I can't remember what the price was, but, it was a lot of money back then, 1939 money. It was a lot of dollars.
But as far as Gladstones go today in our collecting community, there's you. I'm not sure who else has them. I know Chet Falzerano is, I call him Mr. Gretsch. He is the guy.
The king.
Yes, I'd love to talk to him someday, but I all along I've heard, Chet, and I've bought his book, and he's got all the representations in there, but amazing how he's amassed that collection. That is fantastic. But
right.
I really don't know of any other Gladstones, other than the ones that I read about in his book. You've got one. Who else has
I've got
them?
more than one.
Oh, you do? Well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, we're learning something new every day here.
The next year's the Chicago 25th anniversary drum show. We're gonna have a pretty one of the real special ones over there. So, like I said, I've always gone for very unusual drums. So I always consider those very unusual.
Well, with every time I talk to Joe, you guys, I always have to say that he has I have to say this every time, Joe, that of these rare drums that you collect, now get this, guys, he's collecting a very high-end drums, very rare, but he won't get them unless they're excellent to mint. That's his his rule, and he follows that rule because some of the things I've shown you of Joe's from the show, every drum set, everything he's got, very good condition. But even if it's, an older piece, it'll be in what would be considered excellent to mint condition for that era, for that
usually.
rarity.
I'll tell you what. One reason for that was back in the old days, we had to describe this stuff over the phone. This is pre-internet.
Yes.
And basically, it's easier to describe something that's excellent to mint over the phone.
Yeah,
than you start
especially when you're talking about a Billy Gladstone.
Problems here and problems there, and then it becomes a big issue when it, So it just was easier to do it like that.
Yeah.
And also in collecting, I knew if I started collecting everything I could get out of, I went out of control anyway. But so it kind of limited me a bit.
Well, I'll tell you, speaking of Gladstones, those are extremely rare, and Joe got those somewhere. He's had these for a while, and in the next segment, we're going to talk about some of these old-time collectors where you could have found a Gladstone back in those days. We're sitting here with Joe Luoma as a follow-up interview from the Chicago show, but we're not through yet. We're going to come back with another segment. This is Vintage Drums Talk. Jim MESSINA. Joe, it's been a great having you here today.
Hey, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Terrific. We're going to talk again about some of those other collectors, the early days of collecting. Joe's going to tell us all about it. We'll be right back, guys. Stay tuned for the next Vintage Drums Talk studio segment. Thank you so much, Joe. You take care.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it.